Hello, my name is Rourke Passion,
Hello, everybody. My name is Keenan De La Penta.
and this is the Financial Blueprint Canada. So today we have an interesting topic and we have some questions on personal tax. So the first question that comes in is, should I prioritize my RRSP or my TFSA? And I'm going to kick that one off to Keenan.
That's a really good question, Rourke. It's actually not as black and white as people think. So, again, a lot of people ask, okay, should I prioritize my RSP or TFSA? It kind of comes down to every circumstance is different. There's pros and cons to each one. In terms of like what you should prioritize, again, it all depends on your existing situation. So, for example, RSPs are nice because one, they'll give you that tax break at the end of the day. So, if you're looking to save money on your income taxes, RSPs are a great way to put money aside to potentially lower your taxes and also get a tax credit at the end of the year. Also, what's nice about RSPs is it's a nice way to, put money aside when you're in a high tax bracket. And then the goal is, once you retire, to use your RSP as some sort of retirement income. Again, as you're retired, your income will typically go down. You'll start receiving, things such as CPP, OAS. You might have a defined benefit or contribution plan. So again, you're basically deferring the taxes. You also get that tax deferred growth. At age 71, you got to start collapsing it, start withdrawing the percentage. The TFSA kind of applies to all situations. It's exactly like it sounds. It's a tax-free savings account. It'll basically allow you to invest your money tax-free. The growth is also not taxable. And number two is the withdrawals are also not taxable. So
Yeah, so very good points from my co-host Keenan. So just bridging off what he mentioned about the RRSP, the big answer is it depends on your circumstances. One circumstance where the RRSP doesn't make sense is if you foresee having a higher income in retirement than you currently have. Well, then the RRSP doesn't make that much sense because you're going to be paying the same amount of taxes as you're deducting, if not more. So in those cases, the TFSA for the tax-free growth is preferable, but it all depends on your personal situation at the end of the day. Uh, that's why there are planners, there are advisors to help you with these situations. So I'll go on to our next question. Our next question is, how do RRSP contributions actually reduce my taxes? So I can kick that one off. So the way RRSP contributions work is they are 100% tax deductible. So think about it. We'll use a very simple example. Think about a salary of 100,000. So typically you can contribute about 18% of your yearly gross salary to your RRSP. So let's imagine we used 18% for this model. So you would contribute $18,000 and your taxable income at the end of the day would be $82,000 taxable income. So that $18,000 that you contribute to the RRSP is not taxed, and you do not have to pay taxes on that portion of income. So let's say the marginal tax rate on that 18,000 is 30%. Well, you're saving 30% of 18,000, or deferring rather. Keenan, anything to add?
yeah, no. So thank you very much for that, Rourke. That was dead on. One thing I'd like to throw in is again, there's like I mentioned earlier, there's advantages to TFSAs and RSPs. One of the cons with putting your money in RSPs is it the right thing to do, right? So again, like I mentioned, you get that tax break, which is nice. That being said, you can kind of, if you put too much in the RSP, you might find yourself in a tricky situation. For example, let's say you have $100,000 and invest in cash that you're looking to kind of put aside, but you have no liquid assets. Let's say you take that full 100 grand, throw that 100,000 in an RSP. Great, you get that tax break, right? If you have room, of course. Now, let's say you all of a sudden your car breaks down, or your roof leaks and you need to do some renovations, or you need money for emergencies. If all that money is in your RSP and you take that out, that money actually becomes taxable, which will count as income. So it would actually do the opposite of what you want to do. And number two is there's also going to be 10, 20 or 30% withheld at the source. So again, it's a good vehicle to have, but bear in mind when it comes time to do RSP contributions, make sure you have liquid assets available. I would throw what I need liquid in a TFSA. Again, very smart to do a budget to figure out what your expenses are, because at the end of the day, you don't want to put yourself in a tricky tax situation.
Yeah, so as Kenon said there, just to bridge off that, it always depends on what makes the most sense for your tax situation. Typically, what we recommend is having an emergency fund, and we like to have that emergency fund in a vehicle such as the TFSA that doesn't penalize withdrawals, where you don't have taxes, you don't have withholdings. The withdrawals are simple and they're painless. So in that case, have that 3 to 6 months of emergency funds sitting in that TFSA, and then weigh with your planner. Take a look at, does it make sense for me to contribute to my RRSP this year? What is my income currently? What is my income going to be in retirement? What am I actually saving by making these RRSP contributions? Because at the end of the day, you are paying that tax later. The tax is going to come back. So again, like I mentioned to the first point, if you're not paying if you're not in a lower tax bracket in retirement, the RRSP, it's kind of hard to rationalize.
That was good work. Yeah, exactly how he said. Another thing to, be careful with is if you have too much money in your RSP at retirement, and not a lot of liquid assets, you might actually, put yourself in a tough situation come retirement time, right? If you have, let's say you have a net worth of $1 million, but you have 900,000 of that in RSPs, and you only have 100,000 in liquid assets. Well, unfortunately, as you start taking that money of that RSP, it just becomes taxed, right? So again, if you're living on, a pension, CPP, OAS, or whatever source of income, and you want to keep your income low, unfortunately, it's as you start taking out your RSP, you might deplete it faster than you want because of the withholding taxes, but you also might put a pretty big tax burden on yourself. So again, it's very important to plan accordingly before you do this, because if all your money's in an RSP, it's not like you could just take that money out and say, "Oh, perfect, I have the money." Well, no, a lot of that CRA is going to take. So
Yep. And every situation is tailored and every situation is specific. No two people have the same finances. So at the end of the day, meet with your advisor, meet with your planner, and they will be able to show you, and they will be able to show you the breakdown of what your contributions look like, what your withdrawals look like. But that segues us well into the next question, which is, how do I avoid OAS clawback? And typically that does come, the RRSP meltdown strategy does come into play when you're talking about that OAS clawback, because for people with large RRSPs, you need to remove a lot once that hits the minimum of the RRSP balance. So usually what we recommend is taking a look at this again with the planner, but possibly starting to draw down and melt down that RRSP before you start taking your CPP and your OAS. Because once you get over that threshold, I think our OAS clawback for 2026 is about 96,000. Once you get over that, well, you have an extra 15% added to your effective marginal tax rate. So it's definitely a hit you want to avoid if you can.
yeah, and like Rourke mentioned, like who wants to pay, more taxes to CRA, or who wants CRA to eat away at our, our hard-earned money? Like you work all your life, everybody's eligible for CPP, and OAS, but at the end of the day, is if you're on a limited income, why allow CRA, to take more money? Why put yourself in that situation? So that, yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking with that.
Yeah, and again, yeah, obviously we don't want to pay unnecessary taxes at the end of the day. If there is a way to do things more efficiently to avoid that clawback, to avoid losing out on your old age security, to avoid paying extra taxes on your RRSP withdrawals, whether the best way is pension splitting, whether it's splitting that RIF income, whether it's a spousal RRSP, There are ways to reallocate household income to get below that 96,000. And again, I'm going to sound like a broken record, but that comes back to meet with your planner, sit down, outline your goals with your planner, and they can take a look at it for you from there.
What's really interesting about that as well is this applies more to baby boomers. I mean, we're me and I'm a Gen Z. Excuse me, Rourke's a Gen Z. I'm a millennial, so this applies more to baby boomers. People around 62 to 65 years old. The tax-free savings account was introduced back in 2009. Prior to that, we only had the RRSP, right? So what you're going to notice is with a lot of baby boomers, the majority of their wealth is actually in RSPs, right? So it's going to be tricky come retirement because if you have all, like I mentioned earlier, when I used that $1 million example, if you have all that money tied up in RSPs, how are you going to enjoy that $1 million during retirement if you're going to pay taxes on top of taxes, right? So again, for us younger people, we're in a much better situation because we have that flexibility. We have that account that we can maximize in the TFSA, right? So again, for younger people, in my opinion, RSPs are a case by case basis. They do make sense. They may be good for self-employed people that don't have pension plans. It's a good option to have an RSP to kind of give yourself that retirement income. But like I mentioned, just utilize it properly.
Yep. No, that is a great point. And our next question is along that note, and it's what's the best time to draw down my retirement account? So those retirement accounts being your RRSPs, your RIFs, your LIRAs, your LIFs. So the best time for that, again, the answer is it depends on the person. Usually you want to look at tax efficiency when you're looking at drawing down these accounts. So sometimes this is before taking OAS and CPP. Sometimes this is after taking OAS and CPP. It really depends on the person's situation. What I can say is you reach a certain point with your lifts and with your RIFs where you have to take a minimum out. This is required. So take a look at the account before you're required to take the money out. Because once you're required to take out a certain minimum balance, there's no other option. So drawing down those accounts in a way that's tax efficient for you, but also make sure you don't have a massive RRSP at death. Because the last thing you want is, let's say you're an individual, you're 75 years old, you've still got 600,000 in your RRSP, and then you pass away. Well, the CRA is going to thank you because they get an absolutely massive tax bill with that deemed disposition. So in those cases, drawdown strategies should be more aggressive, and you can look at reinvestment options. For example, you have your non-registereds, you have your TFSAs, you have plenty of reinvestment options that you can reinvest the melted down RRSP funds into. You don't have to spend that money.
Yeah, so you've definitely hit the nail on the head there, Rourke. Like you mentioned, it's from a planning perspective, it's always important to have these strategies in place beforehand, right? Sometimes, like Rourke mentioned, it might make sense to start withdrawing your RSPs at 65, right? Because typically the way the RIF withdrawals work is the older you get, the percentage is just going to keep going up, right? So to give you an example, if you have a big chunk of money in your RSP at 65 and you expect your income to go up, for example, at 71, it may actually make more sense to start withdrawing the RSPs sooner than later because the percentages are just going to keep increasing. So you might say, okay, you know what, I want to bite the bullet now, take a bit of money out, pay the taxes now while I'm in a lower tax bracket, etc. So I don't have to, be forced to take more out. So again, it could be a double-edged sword at the end of the day, right? So that's where you need to be careful.
Yeah, exactly. And like I mentioned, it is a case by case basis. I'll delve a little bit into an example I have. So one of my clients that I'm working with, they've just hit 60. They have well over $1 million in their RRSP, and they have not started taking OAS yet. So we've developed a meltdown strategy for them to melt down that RRSP before they start taking OAS, so that when they do have those withdrawals coming in from the RRSP and from the RIF, it's not triggering OAS clawback. You're not paying that extra portion in tax, and we can get that money out right now, and we're reinvesting that money into more tax efficient sources. We have some allocated to the tax-free savings account. Some is being allocated to the non-registered. It does depend on the room of the person and what they have available based on their contribution limits.
Yeah, like exactly. So we're gonna dive into our next question now. Just give us a second here, guys. Um, so in terms of RSPs and families, etc., everybody has a lot of questions. Okay. So in terms of other types of registered accounts we have available in Canada, so we did touch, briefly on the RSP and, in quite some detail. We don't want to, like Warwick mentioned, it's a case by case basis. We also have accounts available to actually save money for your children. So everybody, as they get older, thinks about having kids, right? We all know in Canada that the cost of tuition has gone up significantly, right? So is there a way to, put money aside for education for your child in a way where it will grow for you and you can use that money to fund your child's education? Well, yes, there is actually something called an RESP. So an RESP is a registered education savings plan. So in a nutshell, the way this account works is you put money into it, you contribute. As you're contributing, what actually happens is the money gets invested in the market. It will grow tax free for you. What's also really nice about the RESP is you're actually getting free money from the government, right? So the way that kind of works is for every $2,500 you put into that RESP, the government is actually going to match and give you 20% of that $2,500. Okay. So over the lifetime of the RSP, the maximum grant that you're able to receive per child is actually $7,200. So what happens with that $7,200 is it actually gets paid out on an annual basis depending on how much you contribute. You don't have to contribute the full 2,500 in one shot. You're actually able to catch up over the years. So let's say you set up an RESP and your kid's 5 years old. Okay, you throw 2,500 in. You're going to get that $500 for that year, but you're also able to carry forward 1 year. So again, you don't actually lose that RESP. Those grants. You're actually able to catch up on it in the future as well. What also happens with the grant money is it actually gets invested. So you're not only going to, earn the growth on your capital that you invest, but you're also going to earn growth on that grant money. Let's say you have two kids and one of the kids decides not to go to school. The beautiful thing about the grant money is you can actually transfer the grant money over to the other child. That money, though, bear in mind, is used specifically for education. If you decide to withdraw the full value of the RSP, at one point, or your kids decide not to go to school, unfortunately, the government will actually take that grant money back and they'll actually donate it to another school. So again, it's a great savings account, great way to put money away from school and for school. And who doesn't want free money at the end of the day?
Yeah. So great points. The caveat on that free money thing again is the money needs to be used for education purposes. So when you do go to make withdrawals, you need your tuition proof of enrollment to your post-secondary institute, and then at that point the grant money becomes eligible, and they're not going to claw anything back. But what comes into this is obviously that need to go to school. Furthermore, the money doesn't just need to be used for school. The grant money does, but the account itself can be transferred to an RRSP. So say you have one child, they decide, hey, I'm not going to go to school. I don't feel like it. Well, that's fine. Your portion of the contributions and your portion of the growth, you can transfer up to $50,000 into your RRSP. So it is the most ideal account for saving for your child's education. And when it comes to balancing that with planning for your retirement, well, you do have the option to transfer that over to the RRSP. Worst case, if your child chooses not to go to school. Best case, you have a good chunk of change put aside for your child's education.
What's also interesting about these RESPs is there's various types of investment options available. You can go a few different routes. You can always, go the self-directed route where you can set up your own brokerage account through, Scotia i3, TD, TD, etc., BMO, Investor Line. So again, there's lots of ways you can do this. You can go through an advisor. And again, you have very long time horizon with these RESPs typically, right? If you set it up when your kid's a year old, typically you can have that account set up until the kid's in their early 30s. To be honest, though, as your kid gets older, you typically start to kind of decrease the risk on that investment. But like we mentioned, though, the goal is to maximize that money. The more you have, the more money your kid's gonna have for school. So again, yeah, in terms of RESPs, great, very great savings vehicle. In terms of other accounts we have available, we're kind of getting close to time here. So again, the last type of registered account we're going to talk about today is a TFSA. It's exactly what it stands for, tax-free savings account. Like I mentioned earlier in the podcast, it was introduced in 2009. To kind of simplify the way it works is the second you turn 18, you will get a specific amount allocated that year to contribute to the TFSA. Again, it's depends on a year-to-year basis. It will change each year depending on what the government sets. To keep it simple, let's say you turn 18 today, you can throw $7,000 into that TFSA. Depending on the limit, it can go up or down each year. Any money you don't contribute gets carried forward. So let's say today you're room 7,000, you throw 3,500 in. Well, now that 3,500 carries forward to the next year. Now, let's say next year you're room 7. Well, now you have 7 plus 3,500 for a total of 10,500. So again, as that money is growing, it's fully tax free. The main difference between this and the RSP is one, there's no tax consequences. You're not going to get a tax break on your taxes. However, you're going to get that fully tax free growth, and it will be fully liquid, which means you can take the money out at any time without a penalty.
Yep, exactly that. It's the TFSA is one of the best things that we have in Canada for full flexibility behind investing. So the one way that the TFSA factors in for retirement is if two spouses have very high value TFSAs. So right now our contribution limit, assuming you were 18 and 2009, would be $109,000. So assuming both spouses have made their $109,000 contribution limits, most financial institutions will designate a beneficiary on the TFSA, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with designating a beneficiary. However, in terms of maximizing future growth, there is a specific designation called naming a successor holder. And naming a successor holder allows that TFSA room to be given to the surviving spouse upon the death of the first spouse, which means all future growth on that $109,000 will remain tax-free rather than a $109,000 check being sent to the surviving spouse, which definitely is more efficient for tax-free growth and future earnings.
Yeah, and in my opinion, my favorite savings vehicle is a TFSA. I recommend everybody when you turn 18, when you start, dipping your toes into these accounts or you're trying to get your feet wet, always start off with the tax-free savings accounts. There's literally no tax consequences. Nothing's locked in. You have lots of investment options. You can use it as a savings accounts, your emergency funds, your retirement savings. Especially for 18-year-olds that may be in school and on a limited budget. Why put all your money in an RSP and put yourself in a situation that you're going to regret. So again, TFSA, phenomenal account. That's kind of where I would start. Closing remarks. Any closing remarks you may have, Rourke, before we stop?
Nope. I just want to thank everyone for tuning in to our the first episode of our Financial Blueprint Canada podcast. This will be the first of many, and I'm looking forward to continuing this with my co-host Keenan.
All right. Thank you, everybody, and go Canada.
Go Canada.